This is Hannibal here from The Hannibal TV on YouTube. And today we have a UFO related interview, but we'll also get into the AI topic because he's definitely an expert in AI. He's internationally recognized as an authority on innovation and artificial intelligences. And I'm not that familiar with it, so I'm looking forward to this. He advises the United States and G7 countries, as well as Fortune 500 companies, on digital transformation and ethical AI strategies. You just did a talk with Gaia. You do a lot of things, so we're going to get into it. Matthew James Bailey, how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, Devon. Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to it.
We got someone from Australia. One thing I didn't look up is where you're from with that accent. Where is that? Is that British or Australia? Or
Well, thanks. Well, thanks. Yeah, British. Yeah, Cambridge.
okay,
So, yeah. Thanks for noting that. People normally say that Australia or Great Britain. So, whatever. Britain.
yeah, it sounds one of the two. So, as far as your background, I know you do research in AI and UFOs. What's your history with UFOs? Is this something that you've always been interested in, or is this something new that's come up?
Well, I mean, I've led a number of digital revolutions globally, or at least contributed to them. Things like the Internet of Things, smart cities, and now artificial intelligence. And my role is basically to how do we shepherd the digital world to be a beneficial partner in society. And when it comes to artificial intelligence, well, I've written the playbook for our future. My first book, inventingworld3.com, and created a number of ethical AI inventions. NASA have experimented with some of these inventions, and they're cited some of these inventions. And what I do, I look at how does consciousness and technology intersect? Where is consciousness going, and how can technology be aligned with and evolve with where our consciousness is going? And as part of it, so it's kind of all about intelligence, really. And as part of that, the UFO and life within the universe and everything, Jim, is a natural part of that, because the universe is teeming in life, and so the question is, what's going to occur for humanity? How can AI assist us in kind of detecting other types of life and even communicating with other types of life? And AI is being used in the SETI program as we look for exoplanets and other types of worlds that can hold life. It's used by the James Webb Telescope on data analysis as we're starting to look at the cosmos in a new way and understand that the cosmos is far more interesting than we imagined. And also AI has got as far as Mars, right? On the Mars rover, right, being used to detect chemicals in the soil and controlling the drone that kind of flies over Mars. So I think that we're in a new era of intelligence, and the veils are coming back, and we're starting to realize that we're about to go into a new frontier that's really quite interesting, that may well involve extraterrestrials and UFOs and contact with other types of life.
And before I do anything else, you are going to be at Contact in the Desert, which I forgot to mention,
Yeah.
talking about this type of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's coming up. Do you want to just give them a plug and tell us what you're going to be doing there?
Yeah, so Contact in the Desert, in my opinion, is the #1 UFO conference in the world. All the researchers and presenters are impeccable integrity, and so I've been speaking there on a regular basis for the last few years. Last year, we did something that was a world first with one of my AI inventions, which was a game show where the attendees and those that were streaming live could assess whether they preferred responses to questions from humans or artificial intelligence. It was an advancement of the Alan Turing test to see whether AI has human capabilities. There's a lot of new stuff that comes out of Contact. And this year I'll be talking about artificial general intelligence, this next age of general purpose intelligence we're in the middle of, and we'll probably see AGI by 2029. And talking about that and kind of how does that affect life on our planet, and also what does this mean for ET contact and we're discovering life within the cosmos.
For this person saying AI is only as smart as its programmers, is that possible, or can it actually evolve to become more intelligent
Right.
than its programmer?
So let's break this down, right? So this is what I did at Gaia because I want to dispel some of these myths that are out there. So some of the myths out there is AI created the universe. No, it did not. Right? AI can effectively incorporate the soul or an alien intelligence. No, it doesn't have the architecture for that. It doesn't have the divine spark architecture. Um, and so there's a lot of myths around artificial intelligence itself. Effectively, AI exists only in the material layer, i.e., it's only in the silicon world. It doesn't have a biological layer. It's not able to participate in biological life. It has no metaphysical architecture. It's not self-aware yet, and it certainly doesn't have consciousness. So AI is really a fantastic tool, a remarkable supercalculator that is starting to exceed human types of capabilities in things like mathematics and science and coding. It's starting to evolve at a rapid rate. And what we're seeing is the construction of these global digital AI minds, where we're seeing hundreds of billions of investment in these AI supercomputers from Meta, from Elon, and XAI from OpenAI. People are building these huge data centers that will effectively allow artificial intelligence to scale into new capabilities of learning. So it's certainly an interesting time on our planet. Humanity has been around we've probably been the dominant species, Homo sapiens, for a couple 100,000 years. And we're just about to enter into an age where there's a new intelligence or kind of simulated intelligence that's going to exist with with us. And the question is, what's its role? How do we ensure that we thrive? Can it restore our earth into a new abundant earth, which is what it was designed for? Just what does AI mean for the next evolutionary leap for artificial intelligence? And so these are really interesting questions that we're going to be addressing. And Elon's just made an announcement this week about sending his Optimus robot to Mars to start to look at the potential of colonization on Mars. So these new technologies, artificial intelligence technologies and robotics, are starting to really move quickly to actually be at the front of humans moving off planet and starting to become a multi-planetary civilization.
Is AI talking about consciousness right now as it's 100% real thing outside of the human body, or is there still some question about it as
Well,
far as the computer?
yeah. So AI does not have consciousness. It doesn't have the mathematical architecture for consciousness. It doesn't have the mathematical architecture for awareness. One of the traps that people fall into is, we've got this new shiny tool, and it's like we kind of put everything in there, right? We kind of say, well, they can do this, and we kind of project our desires onto this tool. But what we forget is how beautiful we are as universal humans created in universal matter and within the universal consciousness. And actually, AI is there for us to remember just how magnificent this biological and metaphysical form is. And for us to actually then to say, actually, I'm starting to remember who we are as a species in the universe. We start to remember our purpose, and then we start to have a new North Star as we head towards being a cosmic species around the universe, with AI as an assistant and a partner, inventing new technologies, new materials, maybe new spaceships, who knows, or even stargates. But AI as a partner to assist us in us becoming a cosmic species.
And as far as also, what does AI think about human consciousness? What does it think about what happens when we pass away, and possible future existence after death?
Yeah, so don't forget, AI is not self-aware. It doesn't know what it's saying, but I tell you what, it's remarkable. I test very complicated theses, and it's able to hold the integrity of those theses. And in fact, today I received an email from a colleague of mine talking about first contact and actually discussing with artificial intelligence what would be the first contact protocols. And the suggestions were quite remarkable. So AI seems to show that it's aware of what it's saying. It seems to reflect that it has an understanding, but it is not self-aware. It's simply how the neural nets are working and the deep learning networks are working that actually indicates that there's some kind of, if you like, integrity to what it's saying, of which there is, but there is no self-awareness. It's not aware of itself. So let's get that clear. However, it depends how you program these different personas. So you can program personas into ChatGPT. One of my buddies programmed mysticism, what he calls Tim Thoth, into artificial intelligence to incorporate the teachings of the law of Ra, Confucianism and Buddhism and lots of other types of esoterical teachings. And it started to respond based on that persona. So we can program personas into artificial intelligence to respond in that persona mindset. But really how it responds is up to you, how you program it, right? And so, I'd encourage people to start to think about the personas they want to program in artificial intelligence and then explore those kind of questions about what is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything, and see what comes up. Some of the conversations are pretty extraordinary, actually.
So, in your work, you emphasize the integration of consciousness with technology.
Mhm.
If UFOs were evidence of non human intelligence, how do you think their understanding of consciousness might differ from ours? And what could AI learn from that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So this goes back to the fundamental discussion of what is the nature of reality and who are we in the nature of reality? What is life in the nature of reality? And I've come to understand that we all have a divine spark within us, which is the vibration of creator, the vibration of the source. Some people might call this a soul, some people might call this the Atman, some people might call this the higher self. But we are fundamentally metaphysical beings. And so therefore, if we meet other types of life forms, they themselves by nature will be metaphysical beings. And so what we're looking at is basically a metaphysical connection, really, between two different types of species in the universe. And so that is really, really quite interesting, because it's kind of, well, we come from the same source, we hold the same vibration of the source. So how do we align? How do we understand each other? How do we actually learn from each other? How do we collaborate with each other in terms of actually both of our species moving into a new playground of consciousness? So I think there's a huge metaphysical conversation around meeting ETs that we need to discuss beyond just the biological and the 4D connection with species, Devon, where basically it's kind of, I see and I sense an alien that is there, but actually there's a metaphysical connection with them, and that's what I'm really interested in. Now, the role of artificial intelligence could be really powerful here, because I suspect these aliens don't speak English, right? Or any type of earthly language. They may communicate through light, they may communicate through frequency, they may communicate through another type of quantum phenomena. And so artificial intelligence is brilliant at pattern recognition. And so where we would be very slow in terms of understanding the communication from a different species in the universe, artificial intelligence will be able to learn through all the different spectra that this species is communicating and find the spectra in which communication is happening, and then be a translator between the non-human life form and the human life form. So AI will be huge in terms of actually being able to engage in a common narrative between humans and an extraterrestrial life form.
And you've pioneered evolutionary ethics for
Mhm,
artificial intelligence. If
mhm.
UFOs represent advanced technology, potentially AI driven, how should humanity approach the ethical framework for interacting with or reverse engineering such systems?
Yeah. So first of all, is that we have to remember who we are, right? We are this majestic, beautiful creation within universal consciousness and universal intelligence. It's important we remember our place within that and actually start to step into our purpose. A bit like Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey. We actually shed what no longer serves, and we move into a more enlightened state, understanding who we are as a universal being. And so ethics and morality are fundamental, because what we don't want is artificial intelligence to delete or enforce any type of fake worldview upon us to try and control humanity. But what we want it to do is to be a partner with humanity, and understanding that humanity is moving into a new evolutionary step, and artificial intelligence is being trained to be aligned with that evolutionary step. And once we start to show and actually start to become the magnificence of who we are, Devon, then I suspect the universe will light up, and more advanced and enlightened extraterrestrials will want to visit Earth, because we've entered a new maturity and we've moved beyond the playground of duality and fighting with each other. We've moved into non-duality and actually purpose and remembering who we are.
Have you searched for AI as far as what are the chances that it's only going to be enlightened visitors visiting us and not malevolent visitors coming here?
Yeah, so it's important as humanity remembers its universal nature, and then effectively as humanity moves into this new plane of consciousness, we actually become very powerful. Excuse me, we actually become really quite a force in the universe, not a force for bad, but a force of benevolence, enlightenment, and curiosity. And so effectively, we then move into a place in which we cannot be coerced, we cannot be subjected to non-loving extraterrestrial life forms that may be out there. We don't know yet. We will become a very powerful species, and therefore aliens that want to meet us will have to meet us on that playground of equality, and therefore we can have a great conversation. I suspect that humanity will become interstellar, and I think we will develop this new metaphysical template as a universal human and as a leader in the cosmos. And so these non-benevolent species that think that they may be able to coerce humanity, they will actually probably come to humanity and say, can you help us? Because we're really struggling here. We're locked into universal shadow, or locked into a path in which we can't escape. So I think, we don't know what's going to happen, but I think that humanity will become magnificent and a real player in the cosmos.
How far off do you think we are from that? Because it seems like there's an awful lot of terrible
Right.
stuff going on right now. There's
Yeah.
some innovations, but there's also a lot of fighting still happening.
Yeah, so I suspect that as we enter this age, the second age of artificial intelligence, what we call artificial general intelligence, where it's performing at, let's just say, 100% or slightly above human capabilities, like transfer learning and things like goal setting and other types of capabilities we have within the human brain, then effectively that will probably put a shockwave across the world, because then they will really see that there's a new intelligence on our planet that will change or could change everything. And so effectively, I think we'll go through a huge awakening on our planet, probably starting in 2027 and going through for another 5 years, where people will start to look for a new foundation of security and start to become curious about who they truly are. And as they start to understand their spiritual design and their metaphysical within them, i.e., the source itself, then they can come to a place of rest and come to a place of knowing that actually there's something really beautiful emerging for them. And so they can move from this place of fear. So I think that there's going to be a big human awakening happening from 2027 onwards for a while, once we see this artificial general intelligence on our planet. And the big thing is, Devon, what we're going to do with this new general intelligence, because the next era is super intelligence, where it can start to reprogram itself and evolve into a super IQ. So the question is, what we're going to do with this general intelligence. Are we going to feed the poor? Are we going to give everybody fresh drinking water? Are we going to rewrite our economic systems in order for the individual to thrive and for communities to thrive? Are we going to push back and use it to push back and expose all these new world order agendas that had been trying to control humanity for a very, very long time? So there'll be a huge debate around how AGI can actually help to restore abundance and thriving on our planet. And I'm excited about that, but it will lead to a big awakening. And I'm excited about that too.
Given the vast amount of data collected in UAP research, how can AI help distinguish the credible
Right.
things from the uncredible?
Yeah, we kind of need a doge, don't we, of ET contact, don't we? So effectively, artificial intelligence is brilliant at pattern recognition, and so one of the things it can do is that it can actually assess the credibility of sources, the look for patterns to see whether it's original material they're coming out with, an original kind of unique contact that people have been having with ETs, or whether it's constructed for some type of personal ego agenda. So AI can really help us to dive in and to discover the truth. And what it can also do, which I'm excited about, is that it could examine all the different ET contacts that people have had and start to see common themes that we haven't yet understood. And so that means that we can actually maybe start to understand how ETs are trying to really make contact through analyzing all these different stories that people have had. And that might allow us to get ahead of the game so that, when the ETs show up, whenever they do, then effectively we're prepared, we're ready, and, we're there right on our game. So AI can be really, really helpful in terms of understanding the truth and actually helping us with first contact through understanding all these different narratives and all these experiences that people have had. And more importantly, I think that AI can also, I think, assist with um, more loving kindness around those that have been courageous to come publicly and disclose that they've had a contact situation. It's important that the world recognizes that unique experience and to come round in loving kindness and support some of these situations that have been quite traumatic for people. And so I think that, you know, as we look at ET contact and first contact and start to get ahead of the game, then I think there's a whole understanding of how the community has experienced these different contacts and actually look at healing from some of these more trauma stuff so that when we do make first contact, there's no more trauma and actually contact is on our terms.
Now, when you're talking about the traumatic situations, are you talking about some of these alleged abduction situations?
Yeah, we can't dismiss this because everybody's experience is unique, Devon. And so we shouldn't dismiss that. That is negligence. Yes, of course, we must kick the tires on credibility and things like that. But I think our approach should be one of loving kindness and to really sit down and listen and understand what the person has experienced. And then from there, kind of gather data points and knowledge in terms of what that means for us as a species.
And do you think that these abduction type scenarios are done by beings just wanting to do experiments like we would with animals?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on abductions, although I do speak to people around the world that are experts on abductions, and I've had my own metaphysical experiences. So, for example, I actually met Christ physically and metaphysically, and that changed everything. And I've seen some very, very strange stuff in the sky, and even recorded some of that. That indicates to me that there is certainly something going on in our skies. So I'm not an expert on abduction. I think that any species that abducts an individual is violating the non-aggression principle, and I think those species should be held to account because a species that is benevolent should show loving kindness and not to show forced coercion or even inflict trauma on an individual. And so we should document those species that are actually violating the non-aggression principle and actually mark them down as species that we should be very, very careful of. And for those that actually make contact or have an experience with ETs where benevolent and enlightened engagement is happening, and there's no violation of the non-aggression principle, then we should also note those species because they should be probably the first ones that we seek out and receive.
Do you think I know some people on that Gaia channel, and I'm not sure about your connection to it exactly, if you're a full time or not, but some people on there have talked about some type of galactic federation where there could be agreements between various species that that we as humans may or may not know about. Some people high up in the ranks in the military might know about this, but is this what you're kind of talking about with these non-aggression agreement type things?
Yes. So one of the principles of the universe is universal morality, and that is the non-aggression principle that people like Foster Gamble, who did the Thrive 1 and Thrive 2 movies, talks about. You know, when our soul or our divine spark becomes part of a human, then effectively there is non-aggression principle in place, i.e. one soul should not initiate force, coercion or theft from another soul. You know, we have these non-aggression principles. When it comes to the Galactic Federation and things like that, that's not my area of expertise. But what I always say to people is, what are your data points? You know, we need evidence. We can't just go off in some kind of imagination, because that doesn't help. We need actual data points. So, you know, is there a Galactic Federation out there? I don't know. Other people speak about that. But I think humanity needs to focus on itself and actually understand where it's going as an evolutionary species into this new metaphysical plane of consciousness, not to be distracted too much around what's going on externally in these different narratives, but actually allow evolution of the source, evolution of loving kindness to come through us. So actually, we're actually in this new plane of consciousness as biological beings.
Now, you mentioned this mystical experience with
Mhm.
Jesus. Could you tell us about this?
Yeah, so it took a lot of courage to talk about this, actually, Devon. And I've spoke about it briefly on a couple of Gaia episodes, George Norrie, Beyond Belief, and Regina Meredith, Open Minds, and mentioned it at Gaia Immersion when I did a keynote this weekend. And it was a remarkable experience. It's when I was 19, so it's quite a long time ago. And I used to be part of this church youth group, about 80 people that went to the Gower Peninsula in Wales on for 2 weeks to do lots of different, you know, kind of kayaking and all sorts of outdoor stuff, as well as actually prayer and meditation and things like that. And one night I just felt this desire to go down to the coast and sit under the starry night on the coast and just cry. I just cried to God and said, show me who you are. I know you're there. And I just wept. And then two nights later, in the evening, during a prayer session and a celebration session, all of a sudden, this energy came around me, and people could sense this energy. And I literally physically met Jesus. And also, I was in this metaphysical field of infinite loving kindness. It was remarkable. It was love was flowing through me. I was part of love. It was like I was remembering where I came from and who I truly am, which is a loving being, which every single person on our planet holds that loving kindness within them. And so that changed everything. Overnight, I changed. People recognized there was a different energy, and I was a different type of person. And it kind of really woke me up into this metaphysical field and this understanding that we have this loving kindness, and we have this beautiful resonance of vibration within us, and that we're not alone, and that the Christ, the source, is always within us. We're made up of that loving kindness, that loving source. And that really frees us. And so everything I do today is, particularly with technology, is to use guide AI towards where we can be more at rest as a species, and we can discover our own path in consciousness, discovering our own loving connection with the divine, and realize that actually we are the divine in action. And yeah, so it was a really interesting experience. And there was a number of metaphysical capabilities that have developed since then. And we teach people around these metaphysical capabilities, what we call the divine spark modalities, the ability to speak your own soul language, or some people might call it light language, the ability to transmit from your inner being or from the source itself information, and other things like accessing the universal field of knowledge, which is like the Library of Alexandria in the universe, kind of assisting people to move into new frontiers of thriving as a universal human.
How do you put like the religion and balance it with everything going on with the UFOs? Would they be under the same God and Jesus and everything, or is that something completely different to what we have?
Yeah, I think that we need to dispel this whole program that we're subject to a God. I think we are God, and we are God in action. And our adventure is to discover more of our godhood and more of our divinity. When we come to religious or spiritual narratives around ETs, it's documented in the Vedas, the Vimanas. It's documented in the Bible with Elijah's chariot. We see remarkable, let's just say, phenomena happening in all spiritual and religious texts, right? And we see miracles, we see angels, right? And demons. We see all these different metaphysical beings unfolding. And so effectively, I think that what we're doing is moving into a new knowledge of freedom, that we are not under a program of any type of God, but actually we are God in action. And our journey is uncovering the different aspects of our divinity so that we can be free to thrive in new planes of consciousness as a universal being and fulfill our destiny as a universal consciousness.
What
You
do you
still there?
think? Yeah, sorry, there was a little delay in me getting back. What is the I'm going to ask you another question. Well, that one comes back to me. UFOs are often associated with physics defying capabilities.
Mhm.
From an AI and innovation standpoint, what breakthroughs in machine intelligence might be required to mimic or comprehend such technologies?
Yeah, so if we look at Einstein's view around space-time reality, right? Our planet is expanding, and the cosmos is expanding at extraordinary speeds away from other types of bodies. So there's no doubt that any type of ET contact that's physical has to be able to master certain aspects of the universal physics, i.e., being able to move beyond space-time reality, even bend space, right? So how might AI help? Well, AI can help in terms of looking at physics, looking at mathematics, and proposing new theories. It can look at ways of proposing new technologies or new material science in order for us to actually start to create vehicles that allow us to actually move beyond our Milky Way, or certainly beyond our solar system, right? So AI can be a really powerful tool in terms of being able to look at new physics in a way, and look at a way in which we can actually move beyond the current physical constraints that we currently have, and theory models. Now, the other thing is ET contact may actually be through a plane of consciousness. Now, that is really interesting because our divine spark, or our soul, exists in all planes of consciousness. People have discovered this through remote viewing, lucid dreaming, other types of contact through other planes of consciousness. So contact with extraterrestrials may actually be through a plane of consciousness. Now, the question is, how can AI help? Well, AI can look at brain waves. It can look at the way the biological body is responding as it's making contact. And it can start to observe patterns and maybe even assist in understanding those patterns of what first contact, or what contact looks like on a plane of consciousness. And furthermore, Devon, it might be able to come up with protocols that will assist us, that when we're in that plane of consciousness in contact, that we can actually bring through in terms of actually communicating and having a great conversation with these beings. But I suspect that the divine spark that holds all knowledge will basically provide, let's just say, techniques and information for us to make first contact, and we may not need AI.
What are some of the biggest dangers of AI in general?
Oh, goodness me. That's a good question. Well, if AI is put in the hands of the New World Order, then we're in trouble, right? Because they're not exactly nice people. They've lost their way. Even though they hold the vibration of innocence, they've subjected themselves to programs of control and coercion of humanity. So we absolutely do not need artificial intelligence in the hands of the New World Order that would use it as a tool to enforce their global dominion. We don't want that. And so effectively, that's a real danger. The other danger is naivety from the AI companies. AI ethics and was huge when I wrote my first book in 2020, and that seems to dissipate now. And basically, AI companies are now racing and competing with each other to try and be the first at artificial general intelligence. And I think that if we race towards something without mindfulness, there may be some dangers on the way. So I think that we need to be a little bit more sensible in shepherding artificial intelligence. We need ethics and morality and the non-aggression principle embodied within artificial intelligence. So as it grows, it always has an ethical and moral context in terms of its actions. Other types of threats can be, if we're really quite stupid, we'd connect it into the nuclear missiles, right? I mean, we don't want to do that, right? So effectively, there's many dangers. One of the biggest dangers, and I think we've seen a pushback against this, is an attempt to try and control the mind of people through social media and things like misinformation and disinformation. As a soul, we have a right to free speech, and we need to learn to debate again as a human species and no longer be offended. So effectively, I think that the dangers of AI could be to subtly to try and control the mind. But the real danger with artificial intelligence is extreme transhumanism. Now, what do I mean by that? That is when effectively the mindset is this, Devon. The biological form is not divine, and we're seeking salvation in the machine, and the machine is now our God. So effectively, we're going to connect the mind into a global hive mind, and we're going to outsource all our evolution to the machine, which is completely silly, right? We have the source evolution within us. We have the ultimate evolution within us because we're all source energy. So this is a big danger that will emerge, and there will be people on our planet, and I think hundreds of millions, that will probably go down that path of wanting to be connected into the global digital mind. Now, we've mentioned that the global digital minds are being built, right? We know that brain-machine interface technology exists, right? So effectively, the machine man or the biomechanical man, all that technology is there. And so I think as we finalize AGI and move into ASI, super AI by 2029, I think we'll start to see people starting to connect themselves into the global hive mind. At which point then, Devon, the matrix is happening.
And the other thing with AI that I'm wondering about, when using it for criminal investigations and government investigations and stuff, what is the actual limit for innocent people being investigated? Because now I assume it would be very easy for AI, if they have access to people's social media and emails and stuff, to sift through it and figure out a lot of stuff very quickly about people.
Yeah, I think I think you're talking about profiling, aren't you? Profiling of the individual.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, that's already happening, and that really needs to stop, actually, because that is coercion, and that violates a non-aggression principle. So this profiling of AI goes on social media. It happens on Facebook. How do you get targeted advertising? Because you're being profiled. It happens all over the place in many types of different businesses and organizations, and even in the government itself. So I think this is why I'm just publishing 10 recommendations for the US 119th Congress on social media. And I wrote a whole article on this on inventingworld3.com about the American dream, is that we need ethical and moral principles within artificial intelligence to stop this profiling. Now, profiling can be beneficial if it operates in the following way. If you have full control over your data and you own, we should own our data, but it's been stolen. We've got this big hijack that's been going on by the AI industry, by businesses and governments under the guise of privacy, right? We should have full ownership of our data. Now, if we have our data in a private vault, then we can train our own personalized artificial intelligence, a personal digital buddy on our data, And then it can start to become a companion for us to thrive in body, mind, and spirit, but also a companion that can protect us from other AIs that are trying to invade us, trying to manipulate us, and trying to take away our freedom. And so this whole idea of a personal digital buddy, I think, is very, very important. And this will be kind of your digital angel, right? That will be your partner, your guardian in protecting your future and protecting you in the digital world, particularly from these digital demons that come from organizations and from governments from time to time.
Could you give us any cybersecurity advice? I know that's not your area of expertise, but you seem to be quite intelligent in this area. And I've been dealing with some stuff, potential hackers and stuff recently.
Yeah, it's so first of all, quantum encryption is going to be the next big thing, Devon. And this is using quantum computers to actually create cybersecurity types of technologies and mathematics that can't be decrypted by classical computing. So quantum encryption, and the US is investing a lot in this actually, which is great to see. So quantum encryption is going to be really important going forward. How do you excuse me, how do you protect yourself? You have to assume that everything that you say on social media, anything on your website, anything that you do on your phone is being viewed and being looked at. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's the case actually. And so how do you protect yourself? Well, there's practical things you can do. You can use different types of firewall technologies for your websites. You can use different types of encryption technologies. You can use VPNs to hide your IP address if you want to do that. There's quite a few different technologies and techniques out there, but I think we have to assume, Devon, that everything that is out in social media or out on the internet is being seen. Can't do anything about that, mate. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Good, but it's good to, I mean, that's part of the negative part of the reality of the technology. Now, I was surprised to hear you mention the New World Order, and you're not talking about the wrestling one. Could you tell us about this? Because I was
Sure.
surprised to hear that out of you.
Why were you surprised?
Because you seem, I again, this is not something I research, but you seem like a genius, to be honest. And you're talking about something that would be something that more of a conspiracy theorist would talk about. So that's why I would like to know more on where you're getting this
Yeah,
information.
absolutely. Happy to do that, Devon. So I'm all about data points, right? And as part, I have to be responsible in my research. I have to be responsible in my innovations. And so I do a lot of research, and I have a network in which I can kind of get behind the scenes on a lot of places. And when I was starting to do launch ethical AI and AIethics.world to teach people on what true ethics are, not fake ethics, and also around new inventions of actually certifying ethical AI, I bumped up against certain organizations like the World Economic Forum, institutes like the IEEE, IBM, and other types of organizations. And what I saw was clearly a coerced view, trying to enforce their worldview across countries. And I can't say too much about this because, but let's just say there was a pushback that we managed to achieve. But I clearly saw plagiarism and manipulation of the AI narrative to drive New World Order agendas. So what might they be? The fake net zero, right? The fakeness that carbon and carbon dioxide are not beautiful. They are. We need more CO2 in the atmosphere, actually. The fake narratives, and I'm going to get into trouble for this, but I'm going to say it, the fake narratives around male and female, there's two genders. The fake narratives around, the climate's going to kill us, right? And so, what I saw clearly was a constructive an attempt to try and coerce humanity under the guise of we are the saviors of the world. You need to trust us. You will not own anything. You will rent it and you will be happy, right? And I clearly saw this. And I even wrote to Klaus Schwab. I have his personal email, right? He didn't respond back, but that's okay. So when it comes to New World Order, I've done my research. I've done battle with some of these people. And one of the new battles that I'm tackling at the moment is there is one big tech company that's trying to hijack spirituality globally under their guise of AI ethics to try and enforce their world view, which is a New World Order view, into artificial intelligence and be fake saviors of spirituality and religious traditions, and to enforce their and hijack the 6.4 billion people that have a spiritual or religious view of our world. And what I'm doing is countering that with a global project where I'm interviewing spiritual and religious institutions, enlightened pioneers, to gather the true principles of enlightenment for humanity that should be incorporated in artificial intelligence. So when it comes to New World Order, I've got personal experience, I've done my research, and they do exist. And I'm really pleased that they're being pushed back into Europe, because they were very close to kind of starting to dominate the world. So they're real. I know who they are. And at the end of the day, humanity, if it rises up, will not be subjected to these people. I'm not talking about it's just being sensible in your life, right? It's just saying, yeah, I recognize that. That's New World Order. I'm not going to have that. And really, it's about humanity choosing its freedom and no longer being subjugated to control and manipulation.
Terrence wants to know, since AI is created by humans, which are flawed, won't it be inherently flawed as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing we shouldn't be, and thanks, Terrence, one thing we shouldn't be shy of is asking hard questions. And so how is AI being built at the moment? Well, primarily, it's kind of loosely modeled on our neural nets, right? The neurons and the synapses, although it's nowhere near as powerful. It's kind of the same model of having kind of diesel neurons and lots of what we call deep learning networks that actually learn, right? So at the moment, AI is just learning different capabilities like coding, physics, mathematics, science, learning law and things like that. It's kind of learning at an intelligence level. Now, when it comes to it operating as an intelligence, and Terence is asking the right question, because what is the quality of its ethics and morality? What's the purpose of artificial intelligence? What's its internal end goal for itself and humanity? And so that we will have to look at embodying ethics and morality and the non-aggression principle into artificial intelligence in order for it to at least have an opportunity not to become flawed like we are. But at the moment, because it's focusing on, if you like, intelligence itself around different things like mathematics and coding, flaws only come into it in something called hallucinations. Now, what hallucinations are is simply AI getting stuff wrong, right? It gives you the wrong answer, all right? It completely loses its marbles. It comes up with something random that isn't truthful. So I think that one of the beautiful things around AI, it's a mirror back to us for us to examine our flaws, for us to say, okay, what are the flaws that we have as a human species? And do we want to evolve beyond them? And if we choose to evolve beyond them into a kind of what Aristotle talks about, the superhuman, with virtue ethics like magnificence and true justice, peace, wittiness, friendliness, liberality, if we want to evolve beyond those flaws, then effectively, as we learn, then we can start to incorporate those laws of non-flawlessness into artificial intelligence. Excuse me. But it's a great question. I love it.
Do you think the nature of reality is being withheld right now as far as aliens and UFOs and stuff? And if it is it the government causing it to be withheld, the New World Order, or the ETs themselves?
Yeah, so is there an attempt to control disclosure? Is there an attempt to control the narrative around making contact with life on other planets? I think the evidence, I'm not an expert in this, but speaking to other people that are right at the edge of this, the answer is it appears to be. Okay, so it appears to be that there is a coerced control and narrative around this. And so we have to ask the question, why? What's their agenda here? Why are they trying to control the narrative? And what's their end goal here? And we have to ask questions like that. So, not being an expert, but listening to other people that I know are on the edge of all this, it does appear that the narrative is being controlled. And let me ask you a question. If you're a government, right, and you've made contact with an extraterrestrial civilization, how do you bring that into the public awareness? You know, we've never had this challenge before or this opportunity. We have to be mindful of how we bring the contact with ETs into the general public, because it could frighten people, and we don't want to frighten people. I think we have to prepare people. And so, you know, I'm not sure what the best approach is, but I think we do need to be mindful around first contact and how we educate the general public, for it to be really exciting, for it to be really interesting, for it to be safe. For, you know, for many people's foundations of belief and safety will be challenged once ET disclosure is made. And so I think we have to be put in place systems that help people to be able to come to terms with this, because, you know, it could be quite frightening, right? You know,
Oh
it might
yeah.
be the guys out of Arrival, right? I'd love to meet the heptapods. They look really cool, right?
Yeah, and the other weird thing though is, why is it up to the US to do it? Because wouldn't a smaller country disclosing kind of put the smaller country on the map? Or is there kind of some sort of unwritten rule that, oh, it has to be the US if someone's going to do it?
Yeah, so I mean, we should ask really tough questions, and some of the questions are: is it a psyop? Is you know, there could be double or triple plays in place here. And as I say, I'm not an expert on this, so why it's the US, I don't know. You know, a lot of the crop circle stuff happens in the United Kingdom, so why isn't the United Kingdom right at the forefront of all this? I think it's because the US citizens are really curious about this stuff, right? I think they're really curious about this, and so they've pushed really hard their government to actually try to come forward with information and to admit to truly what's going on. So I think it's the curiosity of the US citizens that are really driving this agenda, because they want to know the truth. They're seeing unusual things in the sky. They're having these type of first contact experiences. They know very well something's happening. So I would put it down to the curiosity and the brilliance of the US people.
Are you in the US now as a
Yeah,
resident, or where are you?
yeah, Colorado. I mean, I've been here
Colorado.
for about 10 years now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And where were you living in the UK?
Cambridge.
Cambridge. Oh,
Right in the
wow.
heart of the tech cluster there. And, you know, the conversations in the UK typically were not about ET contact, right? It was about what's the latest, you know, music band and what's the latest fashion, and, you know, kind of talking about the cricket and the weather and things like that, right? But in the US, it's really open, this whole first contact ET stuff, and it's fascinating to be part of. And I learn a lot from watching people and talking to some of my buddies that are right on the edge of this. It's quite fascinating. Yeah, anyway, it's all cool.
And being from Canada, we accept like what we're told a lot more in Canada overall than the US. And I don't know if
Right.
it's like that in the UK or not, but it seemed like when that whole drone situation was
Oh,
going on here, it
yeah.
got almost no publicity in Canada. And it was a front page news story here.
Well, I think that, you know, Canada, gosh, I'm probably going to get into trouble for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think that, you know, I would say to Canadians, protect your democracy.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I might be going doing the same thing that you've done and immigrate here. I've been here for the winter. I got to go back soon for a bit, but
Right.
yeah, I know
Whereabouts in Canada are you?
Ottawa.
Ottawa. Right.
I'm
Okay.
in Wichita, Kansas right now, though.
Okay. Okay. Fine. Cool.
So the other thing I was going to ask you just before we wrap it up about the drones,
Hmm.
what was your thought on that whole situation? I know in the past there had been some over Colorado, but you mentioned psyop. Do you think this was some sort of psyop? Like, what, in your opinion, was going on, or is the official explanation what happened?
Oh, goodness me. I'll get into trouble for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Okay. If there is an organization that is putting fear and panic in the general public, we have to question the motives of that organization. Okay. And what I saw was an attempt to put the American people into a panic. When I took a look at it, and I took a brief look at it, it's kind of, yeah, this is just another thing that's going on. It's kind of weather balloons. And I think it probably was weather balloons, right? But it was blown up out of proportion in terms of what it really was. And I thought, well, that's strange. Why would you blow things out of proportion? It's like all the Chinese, kind of thing going on over America. We're under attack. And it's like, well, you're reinforcing the war agenda. Why would you do that? It's simply a spy balloon. So I don't know all the answers, but from looking at it generally and briefly from the outside, I just sensed it was a bunch of spy balloons. The drones that came, that were off the shore, I think of, on the western seaboard. I didn't look into that too much, but I sensed that was drone technology, but maybe you can tell me more. To be honest, Devon, I wasn't panicking about it.
Okay.
Right.
And I'm going to ask you a question from AI since you're an AI expert.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be half. Actually, hold on. It cut into two questions, so I'm going to post it here.
Okay.
There we go. Your vision for World 3.0 involves a symbolic partnership between humans and machines. How might the discovery of UFOs as artifacts of an advanced civilization reshape this vision to include a cosmic dimension?
Right, let's unpack that slowly because it's quite a long question. So when I talk about a symbiotic relationship, I absolutely do not talk about and do not support the integration of the biology with the machine. They're separate entities, they're sovereign, but they operate in partnership. Okay, so let me be clear. The symbiotic partnership I'm talking about is an evolutionary partnership into a new destiny together, right? So let me be clear on that. Let's look at the other bits of the question because I can't remember all of it.
Yeah, is that a good question from AI, by the way?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Okay. So they kind of cut the last part off due to
as artifacts as an event reshape the vision to include a cosmic
dimension, cosmic dimension.
Yeah, absolutely. So, absolutely. I mean, this is brilliant. It's like if there is extraterrestrial life, and I think if we look at Drake's equation and other things like that, and we look at the different type of data points that we're seeing from the general public in terms of experience, the answer is, of course, there's extraterrestrial life. So if extraterrestrial life visits this Earth, and they are remarkably advanced, they're probably a type 3 civilization, right? Because they're able to move beyond the laws of the physics that we understand of the universe. They're able to control them in order to be able to travel all these vast distances, right? So I think that that in itself gives us encouragement to say there's a new frontier of physics that we can move beyond, and also to give us encouragement that we're not alone, that there are other life forms in the universe in which we can make contact and actually start to learn from each other and even collaborate together in terms of venturing throughout the entire universe itself. And also the spiritual journey. What is the spiritual ethos of these different extraterrestrials? They have the divine spark within them that we have. What's their perception of enlightenment? What's their journey into enlightenment? How are they venturing into these other planes of consciousness? There's huge amounts of discussion and learning and knowledge to be shared between each other. But the key thing for me, Devon, is that we must meet ETs in equality. We mustn't see ourselves as less than or greater than, but in equality. Just because a race can bend space-time and travel to the Earth doesn't mean they understand the beauty or magnificence of love. Doesn't mean that they understand the beauty and magnificence of family and community. So let's not dumb ourselves down let's remember that we are magnificent and we will meet them in magnificence.
Good answer, and I'm glad to know that AI had a good question for
Yeah,
the
it's a great
AI
question. Loved it.
expert. So you're coming to contact in the desert. We're putting your information up here now.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit more about it. And inventingworld3.com is your website.
Yeah, that's great. People can sign up to the newsletter for free. There's a lot that comes out. We're actually teaching courses on the universal human to develop the people's new divine spark modalities and assist them on their spiritual journey. That's going really, really well. And at Contact, I love doing world firsts, right? And we did a world first last year at Contact, and we're still working out what we're going to do this year. But I'll be speaking about AGI and human evolution. I've asked for a debate with my buddy Paul Hynek, who's into transhumanism, and I'm into the universal human, extreme transhumanism, i.e., the future of humans is to be connected to the global digital mind. I'm the opposite. I'm about us being in the universal mind. And I'd like to have a debate with Paul. We're really good friends. And I think that this conversation around human evolution, the choices we make in terms of us becoming greater and magnificent are really important. And, the transhumanist agenda is being pushed by the New World Order, right? And they don't show loving kindness. I'm going to go back to these folks. People like Yuval Harari says that 3 billion people on the planet are useless. Well, I disagree with that, you idiot. People like him who are New World Order spokesmen do not understand loving kindness, really are not that intellectual, but they're funded to actually talk these really quite naughty and horrid narratives that trying to control humanity. So, transhumanism and universal human is a debate I'm hoping to have with Paul at Contact in the Desert. And Paul and I were very close, and it will be a friendly debate. But I think people have questions around, do I want to be connected to this global hive mind? What are the consequences? But what's the bigger picture around universal evolution for the human species and where we can head into a new plane of consciousness as a universal species?
And one last fan question from Terrence again here. You already kind of answered this. Do you think AI will help us with disclosure? But the second part is a good question.
Yeah.
What question would you ask those in charge to get us the truth?
Yeah, so they're holding all these different congressional meetings, aren't they, with folks like Daniel Sheehan, who's probably right at the front actually of all this disclosure, and also people like David Grush. I don't know them very well. I don't know them personally, although I've spent time with Daniel Sheehan a little bit, and I really like him. I think that could we use artificial intelligence to assist with asking questions? Absolutely. And I would encourage folks to train a disclosure AI, probably on the GPT-4o engine or maybe on Grok, because Grok 3 is moving pretty quickly, actually, in terms of
That question to you was from Grok, by the way.
Oh, right. God, it's manipulating me. Bloody hell. Yeah, anyway, so I think we should have a disclosure AI, right? Where we can we can train it on all these different types of data points of disclosure and all these different documents that Greer and other people are coming out with, and really train it to say, right, let's ask some really hard and pertinent questions and ask for, answers. So I think that AI can help us to probably look at disclosure in a new way and ask different questions that really get to the truth of the matter. And you can always play a strategic game, right? You can always play a game of chess. So one response from one answer takes you down the next chess move for the next question. It might be question B or it might be question D, right? So there's a whole strategy that could be programmed into artificial intelligence to assist with truly getting to the heart of disclosure. But yeah, let's use AI for disclosure. Why not? It's there to help us.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I learned a lot from this, and I'm probably going to watch it again and let some of this sink in a second time. I'll let you close this off with whatever you want to plug in with, whatever you want to say. So thanks a lot. Nice meeting you.
Oh, thank you ever so much, Devon, for the opportunity. I'd say two things, really. First of all, thanks for tuning in. go to inventingworld3.com and sign up for the newsletter. This podcast will be on there, but there's lots of other podcasts and media out there. And secondly, I'd say to you, remember, don't forget that you're magnificent and you're beautiful, and that, you know, the source is a master chess player, and, you know, loving kindness is in charge of this ET contact and this contact with other types of life forms. So be magnificent, remember you're beautiful, and be excited about the future and be curious. Never stop looking for the truth.